it fine? Yes. So, are we all here? Yeah, perfect. Welcome to the Black Holes and the Cosmic Context session. So today our first talk is going to be given by Ioannis Liodakis. Yanni, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'll talk to you about finding supermassive black hole binaries through their gravity signals. And we have a few ways, or the reasons why we think the binaries will give us something that looks like a sinusoidal or quasi-sinusoidal signal. In the case of radio quiet sources, this is basically dictated by the orbital motion of the system. And in this case, we have a few compelling candidates for binary sources. One of them is PT02 that you see here. And in the radio quiet case, we also have clear expectations for what the multi-wavelength signatures, but also what the polarization signals would look like for different inclinations. In fact, we have now a survey of supermassive black hole candidates in polarization of the Nordic telescope, and we're hoping that soon we can be able to tell something more about their nature and assistance. I'm not going to talk about that, but if you're interested, can please find it. Now, in the radio loud case, things are a little more complicated, and there have been a few claims, but we only really have one compelling candidate, which is 4857, that I'm going to tell you about in the next talk. So this is something we wanted to do about in the Owens Valley Radio Observatory laser program, where we have been observing a large number of sources at 50 gigahertz for more than a decade now, and we're doing it with very high cadence of about twice a week. And you can see here an example of what the factors look like. You can see how nicely sampled they are, and they really let us trace all of the variability in the sources, even the most variable sources like 0721 that you see. Since until 2021, we were observing 800 sources. And this is the sample that I was talking about. Since then, we've slightly changed our scope and sample. We're now focusing more on the passenger astronomy, so the connection between lasers and neutrinos, and also gravitational waves, which is where the binary systems come in. So we've already done the analysis of the 18 sources, and we have a sample of, let's say, periodic signals. When we started to scrutinize our results, and we started to see also the fault in our waves. And these are really kind of basic things that a lot of people in the community, including ourselves, until recently, are either ignoring or they are not really paying close attention to, but they are very, very important. So apart from the very basic things of having well-sampled light curves and having more than 2 cycles in your data, which of course argues for having long-term monitoring programs, we found that it is ridiculously easy for red noise processes to mimic a periodic signal. So you really need to be very careful with the analysis, very vigilant with your statistics, and you need a large number of simulated drivers to contrast against your observation. But what is equally important is that the properties of those light curves match actually the properties of the observer. And this is something that people don't know about, is that even the state-of-the-art packages of simulated light curves don't always do a good job. And I'm showing you here an experiment we did recently where we compare the observed Mars spectrum intensity at the simulated one. And you can see for Ioannis, which is basically, it's hands down the best method we have so far, deviates significantly and systematically above the slope of 2, which is mostly where the radio sources are. So you really need to be careful with that. But most importantly, and the final point, is you need to be looking at what we call global significance. What people usually do is that they run their most stable analysis, they found the peak, and then they focus on a narrow range of periods around the peak, and they say if this is significant or not. That implies that you know there's a period in the system, and you know the value of that period, which is almost never the case for 48.7. So what you really need to do is take into account what the particle physicists call the look elsewhere effect. And you need to be asking, what is the probability that a pure red noise filter will give me a better periodic signal? So with all those things in mind, we're actually now redoing the entire analysis of the sample, which unfortunately is taking quite a bit of time. But we're already getting a few very interesting candidates, like the one I'm showing you here, PKS 2121. And these are the over data, and you can see that the red line is assigned to that data. You see how nicely sinusoidal that looks like, right? And also, this one passes the global significance. So it's likely that we have something real on our hands. So of course now we will just keep monitoring the source and hope you get more cycles in your data. Or of course you can go backwards and look at previous derivations and see what's going on. We were lucky enough that this source was included in the Michigan Radio Observatory program, but also HASTAC. So we have 40 years of radio observations on that. And as you go backwards, we do get one extra cycle in the data, and then the signal seems to disappear. But then going further back in the HASTAC data, we also see some sort of behavior. So it doesn't matter how you do your analysis, whether it's simple APPOX or you're doing combined or the joint analysis, we basically came to the same result within uncertainty. Epoch 1 and 3 have the same period and they have the same phase, which is the most remarkable thing of both. So what we really think is going on is that you have one of the black holes as a jet, and then the orbital motion of the binary is changing the Doppler factor of that jet and gives us the kind of sinusoidal behavior. Of course, this is only one, like half the story. This is one component, which is the periodic one. We also have a stochastic component, which they come from the core or the effect jet. And depending on the strength of the different components, you can have light curves looking very, very different. So if you want to read about the lab interpretation and the model, you can do it in the paper that was published very recently. Of course, this is not the only interpretation. There are a lot of other ways that you can have periodic behavior and other models. And this is really where ngEHT comes in. And it will take the sources that we find as periodic and it will tell us if these are real binary systems or we're looking at some other process, which is equally interesting. So it's a really kind of a win-win situation. And just for my last slide, I want to stress out how over figures go, and we have to be very, very careful with what is being claimed. In fact, we're working now on the paper where we go and revisit all of the different claims that happen with using over data at least. And I can already tell you that we're not. Most of the sources don't seem to pass with global significance tests so far. We have a couple more very interesting sources, like video 2131. So you have a question?
Yeah, good question. If this binary separation is really as small as you think, shouldn't nanograph have started seeing something as a source? It should have detected.
Well, we checked.
Okay.
It's too far. It's a higher source.
Oh, okay.
But that was the first thing we checked. But no, and actually this is part of the gravitational wave part of the Bluetooth messenger. Talking about that we are now working with close collaboration with people at Caltech, where we directly feed them candidate sources and they try to.
Sorry, I just skipped. What is the distance of the source?
Well, the redshift is 1.2, so it's unfortunately high. But as I was saying, we have a couple of more interesting sources that are closer in redshift, still to be confirmed, and also we have the ongoing analysis of the full 800 source sample. So who knows what we're going to find still there. So yeah, stay tuned and thank you very much.
Thank you, Yannis. Any questions for Yannis?
In what way is it unique? Oh, God, but it's only was a sample that has such a good variability.
Well, it's one, I mean, the uniqueness is the fact that we have 40, first of all, we have 40 years of information. This doesn't really happen. We are also working with the UMRO group to kind of combine data, but they have a very small sample. I mean, at least compared to how we have like 40 sources, for example.
Okay, so you said besides OJ287, it's the only one in the sample that shows variability.
So far, it's the one that we can be confident about. There are others coming, but this.
But measured for much less specific sample.
Yes, most of the other sources we have about 10 to 12 years of data. But yeah, this one.
Yeah, I just asking why unique. Is something really special about it, or is it just that it's the only one? So it sounds like it's just the only one in the sample.
No, especially the different one.
That's also the second part that is.
The same period and then phase, yeah.
Space.
That's
It's
another.
really unique. I
Okay, wait, no, that's, I just want to clarify what.
And there's no X-ray detection of Google Premium.
Not that I know of.
Okay, so wait.
Please.
Is it how by
Oh, it is detected in ZTF, so it should be in low. I mean, we have a ZTF flag for this. It doesn't show any periodic variability.
but there are optical data
Yes.
and there are spectra. Optical
Yeah,
spectra.
the laser real.
What is it? Laser, data, there are
I can look it up. I don't know.
1.2 most likely from spectra.
Yeah.
And-
Well, I can-
No, the visual, there aren't beetle axes, they got high redshift, not really beetle axes.
So,
Yeah, but would
but
be.
They
there
also
should be-
make probably
there should be something that's magnetic to look at structure of emission.
That would be good to check.
Yes, yeah, I think it's possible to, for the care, to make a proposal with such a.
It's possible to make a proposal, it's possible to get the time for it.
Oh, but
It's a quasar, it's not a lot about the spectral. Just be no longer spectral data.
move it is minus something, minus
102.
or one,
Oh,
it is,
minus 2.
really, it is possible for us to. That's this low discovered telescope, which is 4.3. But of course, scale would be better.
Perfect. Any other questions for Yannis? No? Perfect. Then we will change to the next presentation by Rocco Lico about OJ27.
Okay, thanks. So now you all know, thanks to Ioannis, that this is the best candidate for hosting balance. So this source of ngEHT is famous for showing this 12-year outburst in the optical light curve, and which within the context of a supermassive binary black hole system corresponds to when the secondary black hole with a mass of around 10 to 8 solar masses is the accretion disk of the primary black hole, which is of the order of 10 to 10 solar masses, and producing this optical outburst. So this binary system is well constrained, very well studied with all the multiple parameters. The orbital separation here is around 26 micro per second, 1.1 parsec. And you know this source has been monitored for decades, and here from many monitoring programs like Mojave and you actually from Mojave, you have the rooms of these two projects right here in this room, and GMBA, and here you see the regional analysis of the source, and you see how there is this very clear precessing motion of the jet across time. And for the sake of completeness, I'm also including here this image just to show that there are alternative models to the binary supermassive binary protocol system that can explain some of the observational features and evidences we have, like for instance, these models here, which involves the presence of a thick accretion disk or involving other mechanisms like the fence gradient effect. But so far, the binary protocol system is the one to explain most of the observational evidences. So the main topic of this talk, of this brief introduction, is that this source, OJ57, was detected at the beginning of 2017 at the very high energy domain, the very high energy. So here there is the Veritas light curve. You see, this is the detection threshold above 100 GeV, and this is reported in the astronomer telegram. And this very energy detection was also found to be concurrent together with X-ray enhanced activity, as you see in the bottom light curve. And this is here the significance map. The detection was about 10 sigma. Why was this surprising and important? I mean, this was the very first detection of OJ57 at very high energies. This was surprising because OJ57 is classified as a low supercomputing phase. That means that in the spectral energy distribution, the peak of the synchrotron emission is speaking lower than 10 to the 14 Hertz, which means that the high energy emission of resources is lower. So, with respect, for instance, to the asymptotic phases, that was why this event was surprising. And after this event, several multivariate monitorings and campaigns were triggered. And on our side, what we did was to take a look at GMDA observations, and we had one rather close in time. This is 2 months apart after the TB detection. Plus, we have another epoch which is about 4 months before the TB detection, and we took a look at other GMDA epochs from 2015, 2016, and the end of 2017. So, as you see here, the source is okay. First thing we see is that the jet orientation, of course, is changing, as I mentioned in the first slide showing the ridgeline analysis across time. And the jet structure, the source structure, is overall well represented by 4 model fit components by fitting the brightness distribution across the jet. The most compact one is the core region. Then we have 2 quasi-stationary components that we call S1 and S2. And then the more extended part is fit with this component that we call E. The interesting thing is that during the epoch, which is the closest in time to the varying events, 2 months apart, we find an extra component here in between the 2 quasi-stationary components. Of course, it's not super straightforward just to say that this is the new component. There are several hints that brought us to pinpoint this as the new component. So in this plot, we have the distance from the core versus time. And this is the core represented by the horizontal line here. And light blue and dark blue represents the S1 and S2 quasi-stationary components. And then here is the extended. So as you see, light blue is overall quite stationary. Same thing for the dark blue S2, except for this epoch where we have these new components. And what we see here is that when we find new components, we have these fluctuations in S1 and S2, which is, in agreement with the simulations. When you have shock crossing standing components, this is exactly the motion that is expected and is in agreement with the simulations. So here this line represents the time of the TB varying event. Another very strong indication is that if you look at the light curves, so the color code is the same, light blue and dark blue is S1 and S2, you see that the most relevant thing is this huge peak we find here during the September, which is the one which is about 4 months before the TB varying was observed. And this scenario we know here is that at this epoch here, where we have the peak in the light curves, is where this new component was crossing S1, and they were found to be blended here. And then it was found on the other side of this component, exactly in the following epoch, which is this epoch of March 7th. Moreover, you see that this component is not observed in the last epoch, which is at the end of 2017 instead. But we see that exactly in this component, the flux density is increasing again. And if we extrapolate the speed, the expected speed of this component, by assuming that here it was blended, we expect this component to be exactly here. So the component is fading away because of Coulomb losses, and then it's merging with this S2, and this is why we observe this accelerating here. So that's the scenario we draw here, and this is further supported. If we look at some multi-wavelength light curves, so here we have both single dish light curves, like Polamia at 6 gigahertz and over 15 gigahertz, plus GMA, Mojave, and New. And you see we have three main periods here organized technique. The main one is this one where the TB flare was detected. Then we have this one, which is in the epoch where they were supposed to be blended, and we have this increase in the stationary component. And then in the last part, also at the end of 2017, it's increasing again, which is when it's expected to be to have reached the S2 component. So bottom line of this work, which was a big letter we very recently published, so is that we identified the passage of a mutual feature through a reconfirmation shock, which is this S1 component, as the main trigger of the TB flaring event, of the actually first TB detection of the source. And we can also pinpoint region, assuming it's crossing the S1, which is located at about 10 parsecs away from the core in the projected distance. So over the past years, the source already had some gamma ray flares, and they were both associated either with the passage of component to S1 or with the ejection of a component to the core. In this specific case, this TB event, we claim here that was associated with the passage to this reconfirmation shock. Regarding the interpretation now of these results, there is a one paper, I forgot now to write this here, which is being prepared by the very class collaboration Thalia, and is doing the multi-wavelength analysis and the interpretation of this scenario. All right, next. So yes, here I want to say I'm now working on a new experiment about objectivity shadow when it's on 22 gigahertz radioastronomy observations, which are close in time. They are like March 7. The TB flare was at the beginning of February. That's another chance to properly investigate what's going on in the source. And these observations are also close in time to the very recent GMA Bazan observations published by Ioannis Liodakis, and we also have some ngEHT observations quite close in time. I will mention about this in the next slide. What I want to mention about this experiment, this is going to be really a huge experiment. We have a ground array antenna of 33 antennas in total. You see the distribution here. It's simply huge. Just running a single task, it takes a few hours. That's why I was studying a lot. But now in the end, so the analysis is now done, mostly done, and I also want to show you the coverage just to impress you. So this is the ground array plus the Gaston, and it reached like around 4 or 5 Hertz diameters, and this is the zooming of the ground array. You see how beautiful it is with 33 antennas. It's just amazing. So just finishing with the analysis and produce a very good image. This is just a closure only image, as colleague Ioannis did this with smiling, and it's promising because this confirms that the calibration went well. It took a few months. Yes, this is the very last slide, just to mention that we have a very good coverage here. So besides the GMA observations I mentioned, besides the GMA published, besides the radioastronomy observations I'm working on, we have some other radioastronomy observations in different bands. Here, Thalia and Victor are working on that, plus other epochs, plus there is a very good multi-wavelength coverage from the observations to radio, optical UV, gamma rays. So this is going to be really fun. So stay tuned for this as well. Thank you.
Any questions for us?
So this is beautiful work, Rocco. So do we have any sense, there's these two black holes, one's bigger than the other, so like we should assume maybe the power is dominated by the 10 to the 10th supermassive black hole. Yeah. But they're within, the small black hole will be like 100 gravitational radii away from it or something. Yeah. They're obviously interacting. Then are we thinking there's just one jet system that we're seeing that's dominating this? Or like, is there a smaller jet system that could be, I guess, how do you put this all apart from this to figure out what's happening?
The jet is coming from the main black hole. Regarding the jet of whether the secondary black hole has a jet or not, it is still debated. There are several models involving the presence of a secondary jet from the smaller black hole, but there are other models without this jet that still predicts well the observational evidence. So I cannot say that. Hopefully, the power that we can reach with ngEHT, we are going to resolve the system. Hopefully.
So with the EHT, even in the future, I mean, because even with the new additions from our observations, like since 2017,
yeah.
Do you think we'll be able to start seeing any of the structures that are so hard, or we really have to wait for ngEHT?
Actually, I just realized that I should have shown this image because there are other variables. So
Nobody's
I cannot tell you.
nobody's
So that's something I cannot tell you, but that's something that in principle, to given the resolution that we can achieve with ngEHT, can be resolved. But there is an ongoing work on this, and in the next month, that's where I get applications. So.
Any more questions? Yeah, Thea?
So this is really wonderful work. It's so amazing. So I was just curious on the practical aspect, right? What did it take for this kind of follow-up? Because in ngEHT, this is what we want for 10
Exactly.
sources, right?
Exactly.
Every day, if not 45 or 50. So how hard was all of this coordination? Just super complicated.
I mean, that was hard, but there are several parties involved, so the work is not being done by a single person, of course. And actually, Sarah can tell you much better than I was. She was coordinated with the Moderator for
Well,
the
I mean, to be honest, I mean, the OJ 37 wasn't coordinated by us. That was coordinated by Boston Group and other people in Jose. And we sort of piggybacked on that one. The ones we coordinated were mostly the horizon sources, at least in the beginning, and a couple of other ones. So we can't take credit for this.
Yeah, so it is need to have an optical company proposal. You need to have a proposal for speed. And you can start and all others for connect the zones. No gamma rays, at least it is free. You can get it.
Yeah.
So without GMBA, it is our proposals. Something written. A lot of our yes, it is 3 years proposal and view plus after the notes. Unfortunately, is not working anymore. So it's all
A short question?
Do you think that you'll have a good enough flux calibration? So since you have similar resolution at 22 gigahertz and 86 and 230 gigahertz and so on, do you think you'll have the good enough flux calibration to do the whole game of getting the spectral turnover of the components and then the angular size of the components to determine what the particle density is?
That's a good point, and that's why I would write it.
This is really hard to do because
Yes.
you really don't have the resolution that.
But we should be able to do it.
yes, it's possible it will be only one case that we can do it without some uncertainties by factor of 10.
Okay, very good.
So quickly, wasn't it that
That was done with Smiley.
with Smiley?
Thank you very much again, Rocco.